Welcome to the Microsoft Security Insights Podcast with your hosts, Franklin Grimberg and Edward Walton, where we discuss Microsoft 365 security and Azure security news and products.
I guess the first challenge that I set out to solve was, how do we build a knowledge base for our customers in the product that can be leveraged inside Sentinel? They don't have to go anywhere else. What does that look like? And when I first kind of thought about what the challenges might be around this, I was leaning more on the Jupyter Notebook side. That's kind of where I was thinking about placing some of this and kind of building it out. But then a really good friend of mine, Clive Watson, who I work with, he's over on the UK side, said, hey, have you considered maybe using a workbook and kind of building out an infrastructure that they can navigate and then update and use that infrastructure within the workbook to keep each of the different areas up to date per their business, right? So it's customizable per customer. And I thought, that's fantastic. What a great idea. So I started playing around with what that might look like in a workbook. And the more I played around with it, the more I realized that Azure Workbooks has some really cool functionality in Markdown that is not really talked about, or is even it's not even really documented. But through some heavy trial and error, I was able to code some things and build some things into the Markdown that really showcases the data in a way that I think is more palatable for any customer that wants to consume this information. So I just want to caveat that this workbook is built on Markdown. It's got a lot of really cool links and code and things that can be updated and that can be, managed and changed, right? So, first and foremost, this is kind of how we're thinking about a procedural flow. But some customers may have a different procedural flow, right? But around Azure Sentinel, we were thinking about, okay, how do we take the operations of security and within that SOC practice, and how do we snap that into the tool itself? What does that look like? And so thinking about that from triage, monitoring use cases, modeling those use cases, driving incident response and call outs, focused monitoring and incident summary, right? All of those areas to daily operations and shift schedules and staffing and training, to pulling in, process maturity, looking at documentation. You mentioned Agile, right? I've got a section in here around Agile methodology and how that's important, why that's important, looking at internal, informational metrics and analytic performance, so that you really have a good view of whether or not the operations that you're snapping your processes, your people, and your business to are working. And that's critical to any operations, right? It's kind of that rinse and repeat. And so this is really what that procedural flow looks like. This is where my marketing team, as I was kind of working with them, were like, well, we need to call this SOC in a box. I thought, okay, sure, why not, whatever. So this kind of gets that SOC in a box feel, where those pieces fit within that purview and kind of have that feel. But all of the next pieces I'm going to show are really kind of fit within this overall, right? Whether it's on this side of the box or over here. And you'll kind of see what I mean here in a minute. The next, we have a few things, right? Places where they can put like contacts, pager duty, general IT, emergency, departmental, distribution lists, things that, an analyst may need to quickly pivot to go grab additional information if they're going to go do a crisis call out, if they need to reach out to an external team during that incident response process and workflow. So just a place where they can stub and keep some of that additional information. The process hierarchy, this really is a pyramid that fits within that box methodology. It is stacked on top of the analytical, the operational, the technological, and business processes itself. There's 14 processes, 36 procedures. They are integrated together based on the procedural flow that I showed you earlier, to really give more visualization around how these pieces fit to build up that pyramid, right? As the bottom piece is kind of that compliance and metrics and that, disaster recovery, process improvement. On top of that is your SIM administration, your training, your daily operations, your config management, your design, your incident management, to get to that intrusion analysis, that incident management and reporting, and those analytic detections, right? That's at the top of that pyramid, at the top of that tier. Without that foundational piece of how we want to orchestrate the technology and the business side of it, we're not going to get to the analytical side. That comes later once we snap these other pieces in place. So just kind of a visual representation of that. One of the pieces here that I love that I've gotten a lot of acclaim around is roles and responsibilities. We took a lot of time, not only thinking about roles and responsibilities, but how do these roles fit within SOC operations? And what do they do? Right, so that you can come in here, an analyst kind of has an idea of what their role is. If they need a refresher, it's certainly here for them. But it's really good just to keep an idea for the overall business around each area of these roles, as well as a RACI matrix, a responsibility chart. Who's accountable to what piece of the operational practice within their business? And so I broke it down to that: watching, monitoring, investigation, assess and contain, remediate, recover, and postmortem, and then really thought through like where each of those roles are and how those roles fit into whether they're responsible, accountable, consulted, or informed. And you'll see that this is important because this is going to tie that back to service level objectives. When they need to meet the type of SLOs that they snapped to, who are they reaching out to? Who's receiving that notification? Who's being paged? Who's being called? What does that look like as we get into that incident response workflow? And that really takes us into the overall workflow. So I'm kind of a graphic snob. I like the way things look and feel. I like the way things flow. There's something about that brings me peace when I can see how things flow. And so from left to right, so we have these pieces here, and each of these go from this way and then this way, right? So watching and monitoring, taking a live stream, elevating that live stream to an analytic detection, looking at events of interest, moving those analytic detections over to an incident. And then once they're an incident and they've been onboarded, that incident can then be triaged. What is that triage procedure? And how does an analyst gather more information? What do they do to work to resolve that incident, right? How do they document it, update it, share knowledge, and close that incident? Or do they escalate? And what does that escalation process look like? What teams do they get involved? Do they have an incident response team that's onboarded? Do they have external teams that they need to notify that are tied to services that those external teams own and operate, that may have additional context that they need to pull in to make decisions around the type of data that they're seeing, events that they're triaging, and alerts that are fired within those incidents that they're scoping? So all of this really kind of helps build out that workflow from a high level perspective, so that there isn't anything left to guess. It really is flushed out. Now, is every customer going to snap to this type of agile methodology and workflow? Possibly not. They may have some additional procedures in place here. They may think about it a little differently. That's okay, because they may have a diagram similar to this. They could take this diagram, right, and they could replace the link in here with their incident response framework. Or they can snap to the one that we've built and how we're thinking about it around Sentinel. And this is more of that industry standard. It's more of that best practice that ties to common terminology, common nomenclature around those industry practices. And so they may have other language that they're using along the side here. They may have other languages that they're using for like their IR teams or even their analysts. That's okay. That's great. But we want to give them a framework that they can see and adapt and look at and go, yeah, you know what, we really are thinking about this the right way. And we really like this piece over here. We should incorporate that into the way that we're thinking about our incident response workflow.
Let me ask a question. Let me
Yeah.
ask a question. If a customer modifies this flow, will it affect the operation of the workbook?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Nope. Nope, not at all. This is more of giving them the type of a flow for them if they don't have a SOC, like, you know, that they need to adapt some type of a workflow. Great, it's already here for them to adapt. But some customers that are more mature, they may already have this in place, but now they have a workbook that they can come and put that in, and they can train their analysts around.
Okay, great.
We step into incident response procedures. This is again more around industry standards. This is looking at an incident response decision matrix that looks at reconnaissance and attack delivery, host exploitation, binary, C2, local compromise, right? And then it's tying back to severities. Those severities we call out within tagging, and I'm going to give you an example of what that tagging might look like through the incident itself, because we step through each of those different areas for an analyst to be able to understand not only the severity, but then we give them definitions and scope, and how to consider what that looks like, along with examples. So for severity 1 here, a critical compromise, major service disruption, or a publicly displayed attack. It's a mission critical system. Customers experience substantial loss of service or revenue, right? Potential regulatory fines, penalties, critical business impact, any of those type of things. Those are the questions that an analyst should be asking themselves as they're stepping in and doing those type of triage, to consider the level of severity that they may be looking at. And that those decisions may come later in the incident response process itself, right? Because they may be in the gathering information phase, and that's perfectly acceptable. And they may be looking at escalating to an incident response team. They may be looking at bringing on external teams. All of that is perfectly respectable in the way that they should be thinking about driving to resolution for the incident that they're working. But anytime that they find evidence to these type of criticalities and these examples, they should be thinking about how to share that information back with those teams, and to consider the severity of what it is that they're looking at. So we want to call those out. We break out each of these areas: incident response methodology and watch and monitor, investigation phase, along with that initiating action. So again, we're getting back into that step 1. This is where we use the tagging, that annotation of tagging, bringing in the incident alert, and doing a critical call out, and then following the procedure that is snapped to that critical call out with a response time requirement, what that looks like. So this is also training material for the analyst. So anytime you bring on a new analyst, you can leverage this to say, okay, here's what your initiation of action is going to look like as you map to this incident triage process, as you're thinking about the criticality, you're thinking about these things, and we're giving you prescriptive actions to take. These are the considerations that you want to be leveraging before you step into things like escalation and bringing on external teams. But all of this is really called out for them so that it's not left to guesswork. And this is really the operational piece that so many customers have asked me for is, Rin, how do we operationalize this? How do we really make sense of the data that we're seeing, and the context around that data, the services and the logging and those things, right? Now, this is a framework. This is a starting place. and they may have additional context around internal apps they've built, their DevOps process, things that they're doing within services that are driving revenue. They may have that additional context. This is the place where they can go in and update this section of the workbook to add any additional incident information, add any additional initiate action information, any service level objectives, if they want to change the severities or with the amount of time it takes to triage and to notify. This is really where they would do that. But we're giving them that framework to at least a place to start, right? Where Sev 1, all SOC analysts, IR team, SOC manager, director of IT security, and CISO, right? How should they do it? They should be looking at it through, and of course, I'm calling out Teams. Teams phone, encrypted email, Teams war room. We now have a feature in Sentinel that gives customers the ability to click the action button and immediately create a war room within Teams and integrate that feature set between Sentinel and Teams together, and to spin that up so that it's protected within the grouping of those individuals who's going to work that incident. So a little bit of a call out there, because there are some of those integration features that we have. But they may have other areas or tools that they use. This is that place where they come in and make those changes.
So one thing that is a huge favorite or thing that Franklin loves is training, right? He believes that skilling up is the way that you build trust and you build continued relationship and business with customers. So when you hit the word training, that SOC operational person, you hit upon how we do business in the SOC. But I noticed in your workbook, your very last tab within the main landing page of your workbook says SOC training, where you call out the SC200, all the learning modules, everything's in there, which is pretty cool. So right there at the very bottom. Yeah. And you can see at the bottom there, you can see where S200, all the stuff, and each one of those buttons on there or those badges are hot. So you can click on it and it'll take you to the link. Start out from everything from introduction to Sentinel to KQL. So really get call out where you're keeping that person within your workbook. They're doing their job, they're learning, and they're skilling up. So you got the combo, right? And you sized up with extra fries. So pretty good there.
I like that analogy. We did. We thought about that. We're like, okay, how do we size up? So I was part of the learning path team to build out the content for the SC200 for Sentinel. I helped build the questions and review the content, and I was very pleased once it came out because I was like, yes, I can put this into workbook. This is perfect timing.
Yeah. So open disclosure, one of your collaborators on that is the co-host of this podcast. You get two guesses, and I'm not one of them. So there you go. So yeah, we got some folks who love to do that type of stuff. So hey, not to disrail your line of thought. Go ahead and continue.
No, this wonderful segue. Absolutely wonderful. Honestly, between the training and the tools and resources too, I don't know if you've seen this area. These are all hot. These are all live. They've been vetted. They've been tested, and they're available for analysts to be able to use as technical resources and threat intelligence resources to do their job outside of tools and resources that are within the tool themselves. So as they do need additional resources, we thought about what that glossary or that table of contents might look like. And in V2, I've got a few more, favorites that are coming that we vetted that we'll be pushing into the workbook in a V2. But for now, this is our V1 list.
So let me ask a question. So when you guys go to V2, if I have this workbook in my environment, will I get the notice that there's a workbook upgrade and I can go ahead and do it then? Or will I have to download the JSON content and then update the workbook manually from your GitHub? I mean,
that's a great question. So we are partnering with the product group to pull this in and merge this in with the product itself. I'm working with them to make this applicable. For now, you can go pull it down from my GitHub while we're waiting for the product group to do this. Once it's there, then the product group will then make sure that it's every time I push new updates, it's then pushed into that version of GitHub and made applicable to the here, I'll click on this and show you. So inside here, instead of this showing customer defined workbook, it will actually have screenshots. I've already uploaded the screenshots. I've uploaded the stuff here, and it will become a managed right through GitHub. So all of our workbooks are actually through that process. Anytime a workbook is updated, it's updated through the GitHub process.
Very cool.
Hey, Edward, can you read the chat and Twitch there if there's any questions you want to bring up or comments?
Yeah, I actually turned that computer off on Twitch. It was making the echo. I need to log back in and do it then. I'll go back to Twitch.
We'll have Rod do it. Rod's been
Let Rod do it.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here. I can do something.
Yeah.
Take a look at what Cyber Batgirl had to say.
Yeah, there's a few questions here, Ren, and I'm
sure
you can just jump into things because I absolutely want you to get to that spot where you show all the other goodness as part of this solution. This is not just a workbook, by the way. There's a lot more to it. So Cyber Batgirl is here. And she has some comments and also a couple questions. So the first item here is, this is great. One thing I see customers missing is that they get all this awesome technology, and as part of the process, they forget to interconnect some of the services. Do they have MDE, MDI, MDO, for example? Do they have connectors configured? Then have their processes been updated? So I have had customers that install MDE, but the process was never changed to use MDE for analysis and may still say something like using Symantec, so they do not update their configuration and day-to-day tool use because of what the process says, right? So kind of take that under advisement. Last piece of this, so we can kind of show how this works. And then last, similar to what Ren said, now you're bringing new data that is being used differently with many teams, but the sharing is not taking place. For example, compliance, privacy, and other team involvement. So how would a security operations center, or how would they develop processes around being able to utilize this tool to kind of address those missing factors, those missing things?
Yeah, sure. So the way the workbook is broken down is just for that purpose. When we click on analytical, business, operational, technology, that's the foundation of not only the pyramid that I showed you within the box itself, it's the foundation of the workbook. So between analytical, business, operational, and technology is a table of contents with a bunch of sub pages for you to be able to update and build out and to continue to develop across those analytical processes. This is a starting place for each of those areas where we're calling out some of these things here, right? For intrusion, incident triage, workflow, all right? But like, for instance, the configuration stuff, like under technology, we've given a place for architecture, data retention, network diagrams. You could add a place within this for configurations and be able to store those configurations and maybe even dates of when those last configurations were updated and maintained as part of that tabletop exercise, so that if you go through a tabletop exercise and you're looking at the way configurations are tied into your analytics, there's context around that. So this workbook is designed to be able to bring in additional data sets or additional procedures, operational, technological, business analytical, whatever, as the business sees fit, and configuration certainly falls into that area as well. So hopefully that answers the question. It's a place to start, but it can be grown, right? It can be matured and additional content added to the workbook.
Yeah, the one other person posted a question, and I'll respond the best Microsoft way possible. I already did, but do you know, working with the product group, when this will actually be available within Sentinel itself without having to jump out to your GitHub repo?
I push on them every day. Like, please go do the merge, right? I've got my pull requests out there. I've updated all of the artifacts and everything in there. It's just a matter of time. So I don't have an ETA, unfortunately, but okay. I put feelers out there almost every day, reaching out to them saying, hey, when, can you guys push this? So they're aware of it, and I'm being a squeaky wheel.
Well, I'll help you, and I think Edward can as well, because this is important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is good stuff here. I mean, and you can tell I'm paying attention because I'm actually, my attention span is like that of a goldfish, right? I am going down each one of these and being meticulous about looking what's in here. So much good material, right? And I call me greedy. I can't wait to version 2, even though I haven't cleaned my plate yet, and I'm asking for more food. Right? You can see all my analogies and metaphors around food. I'm a glutton, right? Oh man, when I see these things, part of being a fan of work is also being I won't say a critic, but a questioner of what is being presented. So let me ask you a question here.
Sure.
I have your workbook. I have it downloaded. I've gone ahead and made it part of my template and saved, and I can see it. But if a customer says, okay, I have it, where do I really get started? Do I use this to build out a framework outside of Sentinel? Suppose I wanted to use this outside of Sentinel, right? Can I apply this to and integrate this into how I go about my SOC? Is this SIM independent of a source, right? Of agnostic of a SIM? Does it have value outside of Sentinel? I know what my answer is by looking at this stuff, but is that a reasonable request to say, can I take this and use this, whether I want to run my own SOC, or if I'm using an external entity to manage my security alerting, monitoring, log aggregation, saying, how come you're not doing business like this? Right? Show me your process, and I'm gonna show you what I'm reading and use this as a checklist of sorts. So I know that's a lot that I just put into the question. So I'll break it down to 2 things. Where do I get started to implement this? And can I use this sort of a checklist of sorts to either, if I'm going to build my own SOC, or I can use this to go monitor effectiveness of someone else that I've outsourced that to? Are those reasonable requests or use cases?
Those are definitely reasonable requests. Let me start by answering your second question, right? These are industry standards, best practices for SIM, but they traverse across security products as a whole. This is the people and process side of the technology. It's how do I take a technology and snap process to it so an analyst knows what actions do I go take? What do I go do when I get a ticket or I get an incident or I get whatever you call it that fires within whatever product you're using? That's what this is doing, is it's operationalizing the actions an analyst takes based on the responsiveness of the tool, what the tool is giving them.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I've been asked to do, what a lot of folks have been asking me to do from even within Microsoft, and I'll give you a sneak peek as to what V2 is going to look like, is, okay, Rin, this is fantastic. It's around Sentinel. This is great. So now as alerts are coming in from, say, third-party tooling or other first-party tooling, and an analyst needs to pivot outside of that tool, right, or outside of Sentinel to go into the incident response piece of, say, MDE or Security Center or MCAS, or I need to go dive into, dare I say, some of the third-party tools out there like CrowdStrike or Carbon Black, or I need to go look at Sentinel One, or I need to go dive into Okta, or I need to go do something that's happening or within my network peripherals, or even application services that I may be running within AWS or Google Cloud Platform, that Sentinel is monitoring. Right, what actions do I take when I step into that, and how do I triage those? And so that's really what this is doing, is it's bringing unified effort across no matter where those tools and those peripherals live, so that an analyst knows what to do and what context to drive from the type of alerting that they're seeing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's your second question. Your first question, where do we start? Well, we start with the foundation. We start with analytical processes, business, operational, technology. We start with these 3 areas. These are the foundation of the rest of the pieces of the workbook. Starting with analytical processes and breaking down intrusion analysis, incident triage workflow, incident analysis, information fusion, onboarding, SOC use cases, doing some type of focused monitoring, or if I need to do host analysis and subtle event process or data exploration within my tool, what do those look like as far as procedures and processes I need to follow? Starting there and crafting out how much of this can I consume already for my for my analysts, and how much of this do I need to change based on my current infrastructure and based on my current workflow today and within my tooling? What needs to evolve? What needs to adapt based on how I currently do things today? Or do I need to really look at it and be like, oh, you know what? This process and procedure and the way this is carved out really is maybe more on the maturity side, and I need to shift the way I'm thinking of processes and the way that we're doing that narrative over to this type of methodology. So it's to get people to think about what they're thinking and looking at today, how these things are being executed within their environment today, and how to drive that. And so each of these are broken down with purpose, scope, and process. And then you see the subs. So you have your table of contents here, and this can grow. But under intrusion analysis, this is where we focus on this intrusion analysis. We have these subcategories or these procedures, right? And so what do those look like? So we break that down.
That's why some of them are blue, because they're subs.
Correct.
Okay.
So the blue one is your high level. It's your process name, and then your white ones are your procedures that fit underneath that process name. So this maps back to the table. So when you click on this, each one's going to take you to a new page where you can then drill in to each of the different high level processes and the procedures that snap to those processes. So this is the place you want to start, is within these 4 areas.
Cool. Great. Any more questions coming across Twitch, Rod?
No more questions. We just answered. Well, I answered a couple things.
Okay.
Someone that's kind of new to Sentinel, and that's awesome.
Very cool. Very cool. Mr. Ray, continue, sir. My brain is just overloading. You can feel the knowledge spilling out onto the floor, right? This is good stuff, man. And let me go back to something. Maybe I heard you wrong. How many hours did you spend on this? 40, 50, 60, 70?
This took 4 months of development. I started end of December.
I never knew how much effort went into this, even though I know Clive, I know how much he loves making workbooks. And then TJ Bandit came on last week, I believe, and talked about his Zero Trust Tick workbook. And when he told me how many hours he put into that, it amazed me. Like, this is a second job.
Yeah.
Doing this, right? Okay. Wow.
Yeah, this was my stretch goal. This was really something that I felt passionate about, that I felt not only the industry needed, the product needed, and our customers needed. That this was something that could really elevate, the way our customers are thinking about leveraging Sentinel. And I felt that it was such a critical piece that was missing. Every time I'd have conversations, or I'd listen to you, Edward, or some of our peers right on our team, and I'd listen to those conversations, and I just would think, we've got a gap here. There's a concern here around the fact that the tool does these things, but no one understands how to actually do it, how to sit down and put it to paper, so to speak. So I really felt like it was time that we sat down and I did kind of a SOC dump from my brain. I was like, okay, over the years, I've pulled notes together, and I've helped build process, and I've helped do onboarding. And, as we were thinking about it, from Xbox to Microsoft Gaming to Windows devices to the hub, the plug into the CDOC. And it was like, let me go pull all of this knowledge and let me see if I can't put it into something that's going to be, that's going to resonate with the way that we think about that. And then, how can we drive this effectively around the tooling itself? Which I guess kind of leads me to this next section here. On the incident triage stuff, using like incident annotation stages by tags This was an idea I got from ArcSight. On the ArcSight side, we would annotate stuff. They use cases, we use incidents. They don't use tagging, we use tagging. They use some other type of annotation. But the idea of the way we can elevate an incident just by adding additional metadata has always stuck with me. It's like, that's kind of important, especially if I'm an analyst and it's like, hey, I've seen this over here. Ooh, that might be important over there. Maybe I should let someone know about that. I can do that by adding a tag, right? Some type of metadata that says this is tied to a known, threat actor, or this is tied to this, or whatever the case may be. And so really kind of flushing out what those the triage stages look like. A lot of these are snapped to the way, closed false positive, remediated insufficient data, no risk. These are the way Sentinel is doing those closed things. So those are kind of snapping to that piece there. But then there's some additional tagging like under investigation, right? False positive, no further action, or this has been deemed actionable and it's open. And then what that needs to look like and how to go through that that triage process to give them a really good sense of ownership, sense of closure, sense of workflow as they step through each of these sections and dive into that before they're making decisions on escalation or crisis call out. It's really imperative that they kind of have a good understanding of what that might look like. And to that end, underneath that, the incident analysis, one of the things that we also did was we stepped through and built out questions. So we created it's a playbook, a logic app. And the logic app uses, it's called Get SOC Actions. I actually talk about it in my blog, right down here. So this Get SOC Actions, as well as the SOC RA watch list. These two things go hand in hand. And these pieces of content that we created ties back to this section of the incident analysis procedures, because one of the questions that I would often get from customers is, okay, you're giving me some remediation actions through like Defender for endpoints, or you're giving me some remediation actions or actions I should take through like Security Center, Azure Defender, which is great. And we can see that now in the incident or the timeline. Some of those pieces are starting to bubble up and make sense, but there's still a lot of things that I'm onboarding. I'm Mr. Customer, I'm onboarding these, and I have specific actions I want my analyst to take. How do I make that a reality for my analyst? Well, so we took that into consideration, and we basically built this wonderful playbook that ties back to this piece. And I'll actually kind of show you how we thought about that. So we have this watch list in here. And this watch list is SOC recommended actions. The alias, all you got to do is give it this alias. I don't care what the name you give it. The alias is SOC RA. The reason that we gave it that alias is because we've built several pieces of content off of that alias. It's basically a custo query lookup from that alias to be able to go pull back data that a customer can put into that CSV based on actions. And the playbook then can run and deliver those recommended actions. So I'm just going to go click on an incident.
I'm glad you talked about that, because watch list is Frank's favorite feature in Azure Sentinel. I mean, he loves watch lists. And as soon as you finish that, put this in the back pocket to circle back around. How have you considered tying your workbook into the one that's readily available called Security Operations Efficiency? Because what can be measured can be managed. Right now, your SOC manager is looking at, we give you all the tools to run it, and here's some framework. Now I'm looking at what if I'm looking at the workbook that says SOC efficiency, and now they go back and saying, okay, I'm using the SOC process, but I'm still seeing my incident from time to triage to close hasn't really improved.
Right.
We can figure that out after you talk about after you talk about notebook.
I think we went a little bit too fast here for people who are going to be watching this on video. Can you take the steps back through and show us what you did to get here? I think we missed some things.
Show a blank comment and then,
Sure. I'll actually delete the comment.
yep.
So I came into the incident, right?
Okay.
And clicked on alerts or timeline. Either one works. You can click on timeline or alerts and click view playbooks. So this takes me into the playbook. And I know I want to run the get SOC actions playbook. So we'll run that. We'll refresh. And now there's the information. Okay. Now here's the cool part. So yes, there's a playbook that can run, that can go pull this information, but we've done one even better. So this one happens because this one is inside the SOC RA watch list. These steps are in there, and because they're in there, I can go click on the incident overview workbook right here, and inside the incident overview workbook, and this is also coming as an update for customers, remediations found. So this is a custo query that is pulled from the SOC RA watch list with those same exact remediation steps. So if they don't want to run the workbook or the playbook to have it pushed into the comments, they can actually go click on the workbook incident overview, and if it's been onboarded, they can see what those steps are directly from this workbook. It's all there for them. So we've integrated both.
So you can update the CSV file with the steps, and you're linking this based upon the incident type or alert type. How is this being linked? And can you update it for your own procedures other than your recommendations?
Yes, yes, and yes. So it's tied to the alert display name. And that alert display name can be customized. It can be out of the box, or, and you can build steps towards the detection we give you out of the box, or it can be a detection that you create ad hoc. And then, but the steps for that, go update the CSV file, and then it, right, because they're linked together through that alert display name.
Are you doing anything, because it doesn't Defender for Endpoint automatically use something now for the display name for alerts? So when that's going to come across, do you have the recommendations for, do you have those alerts in a way that's easy for you to manage that coming from Defender for Endpoint?
Well, this is kind of what I was alluding to earlier. So this is where in the timeline under the public under the preview, you can see where they're putting those remediation steps. This is where they're putting them. The product group is putting them here. But the remediation steps here and what steps that are in the SOC RA could be the same if that's what a customer wants to do, or they could be completely customizable or different depending on if the customer wants to take different actions based on business need. So that's the gap is, yeah, there are recommendations that we're giving as a company, but there may be additional actions that any SOC may want to take above and beyond those recommendations. And this is where they now have a framework that they can go and build those actions and have those actions applicable and available to any SOC analyst.
Are you going to look up? So this has been a common ask for a long time, dealing with playbooks and recommendations. Are you looking at setting up some sort of community SOC RA for the different scenarios? So as a team sport, we can share the recommendations across the board?
We could do that. I mean, I'm not opposed to that at all. I did want to show you one other thing though. Take this one here. This is a custom rule. So the playbook is very intelligent. I want to show this so that viewers get an idea of why the playbook is very intelligent. If you have a detection that has not been onboarded to the SOC RA watch list, and you need to be able to have an analyst triage it, what does it do? Well, it actually pulls down the questions from the playbook, which is the intrusion analysis questions, and the things that they need to consider in order to take the right actions within the incident response procedural processes. So it has a hook directly into the workbook to go pull those if it's not been onboarded. And this makes it really nice because now anytime I have something that's not been onboarded, or maybe something that, I've got a SOC engineer that's overzealous and they're onboarding lots of detections, things are happening really fast and I'm kind of behind on how I want to, leverage those type of SOC actions, I can make sure that this work or this playbook is intelligent enough that it's going to go grab the incident analysis procedure and it's going to go push that in here so that any analyst now understands what steps do I need to take. Well, I need to group them. I need to understand the attack. I need to analyze and assess the impact of the attack. I need to step through these additional sections here, determine what action is needed, and then follow my workflow procedures. Update, tag, close incidents, report the incident, alert events, bookmark, build and shift logs, escalate incidents to IR team, or use tagging in the incident, right? So again, it has all those hooks back to what those procedures are, those processes and procedures for the analyst. So it's intelligent in that way, whether it's in the SOC RA or it's not, the gap has been filled.
This is a lot, right? You can see me. I'm feverishly taking notes. I'm glad I can go back and watch. I just occurred to me. I can go watch it on YouTube. Why am I taking notes? I can go do it, right? I don't want to forget what I want to focus on. So if I go back and watch the YouTube, it still won't remind me what I'm doing. But this is outstanding. I mean, I'm looking at your workbook. I'm looking at the incident overview workbook, the SOC efficiency workbook, and a few others. And when you pin these together, and then you have, actionable insights and intelligence around your playbooks, your watch list. I'm definitely going to go download those and put them in my lab too, right? Outstanding.
This is really why we built this as a whole package. We really felt like it needed to be not just the workbook, but it needed to be additional components to the workbook to drive the right actions and that fit to those processes and procedures. So now they actually can see how it works, right? It's like, oh, okay, yeah, the playbook and the SOC RA and the incident overview, all of those pieces fit into the overview and the way that we're thinking about the SOP for SOC operations. When you bring those pieces together, this becomes a very, very powerful package. Packaged content around operationalizing our tool sets that I think can differentiate ourselves within Azure Sentinel and differentiate ourselves in the way that we're thinking about, incident response all up. So great call out. Thank you, Edward.
Yeah, great stuff. I mean, it's so much in here that, there are at least two or three things inside the Sentinel features of functionality that you could become an SME on and mid-career out of. Like, I'm still weak in notebooks, right? But you come from that heavier Linux and Python background than I did. I was more of a networking guy. And so I'm looking at things and I'm sort of putting the stitching together like I'm building a SOC right now. So I'm going to add this in here. I'm going to put this in here. And I would ask one more question.
Absolutely.
What if I'm an MSSP and I'm building this out? Are there any considerations that I need to make sure I take note of, especially when I have to lighthouse someone else's environment to be able to have delegated access? Is there anything special I have to do? Or just the fact that if I'm going to help manage someone's thing, Lighthouse is stood up, can this can this workbook be extended out via a Lighthouse managed tenant to tenant MSSP? Or huge companies are doing this. You've seen that where internal groups are acting as the MSSP to the larger business units, right? Because these business units want to pay for their own log aggregation. Like, no, it's not coming out of my pool of money because operations wants to dump all the stuff in the LAW. We don't want to pay for that. We want alerts, not traffic, right? All these events and stuff can go to another LAW, ADX, blah, whatever. Is there any special consideration, or is that a topic for another podcast we can get you back on to talk about? How do I extend this out to that model?
The high level answer is yes. Really, where the workbook is concerned, and just thinking about the framework as a whole, it comes down to the the framework itself, this piece from an MSSP level. So you may have, and this is where it's kind of interesting that you bring this question up. I've had this question from Mark Simos. I don't know if you know Mark Simos. Shout out to Mark. He's
Oh yeah,
absolute fantastic guy, and he's actually helping me right now land this on a several different public facing places that are shortly to come, right? Which will also snap back to kind of our V2 time. But we're thinking about kind of CAF, and we're thinking about docs.microsoft.com. We're thinking about some other places, but V2 is going to have some of those MSSP capabilities where it's like, okay, if you're a standard SOC, maybe a standard business, and you're just doing it for your all up business, great. This model works fantastic. But if you're an MSSP, then you got to think about, okay, well, it's hierarchical. I may have my tier 1, tier 2 outsourced, and I may have an MSSP focused on that, but my local business may be doing the escalations. So I may have my outsourced SOC escalating to my business team, and then my business team may be escalating to my external teams where applicable, right? Where they may have services or service owners and application owners and business owners that are going to have more context. And so that triage might look like that, or that workflow might look like that, where it's MSSP down to the business, down to, and so that this diagram would take on a little different frame of mind, incorporating into an MSSP. We've talked about that as definitely on where I'd like to go. This model can certainly be adapted in that way. Again, any of these links and these images I have in here are subject to be changed by any customer who wants to come in and say, okay, well, we're doing it this way, and this is kind of what we've already built, and here are Visios, and great, this is where we're going to store that information, and then you can update those links. But great question. Certainly is definitely where we're headed. Yes, it can do it. The framework isn't going to change that much. It's just all about where does the MSSP sit in the framework, irrespective to the business people, and who takes on those processes, where are those roles and responsibilities, who's accountable, who's responsible, and thinking about it from that level, right? That's where the differentiation is going to be when you bring in an MSSP.
Okay.
Can you show? Go ahead. Sorry, Edward. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead, Franklin.
So I had a question in the chat. Can you show us how easy it is to actually edit the workbook?
Absolutely. Yep. So each of these sections come with an edit button, right? So we'll just take. I'll show you kind of. You can even add additional buttons. So this is links, and you can see how the links are broken down by tabs, link text, with the settings for those. This is a primary button because they're blue. If they're a secondary button, then they'll be white. And then you can just click updates after you've updated them. So it's a matter of just coming in here, scrolling down to the bottom. You can see there's an open space here where I could set something in. And then if it needs to sit in between these other buttons, I use the up or down arrows, and I can just push that button up or down wherever I want it to go there. On the page itself, let's take this page for instance. Again, this is markdown. So 2 pounds is going to be a larger text. 3 pounds is going to be still large, but a little bit smaller. So kind of a sub. Think about it from like, you're creating a Word doc, and you want it to be higher or lower, and then you're creating your bullets, so dashes. And then the table is really kind of a fun format. This took me a little bit to kind of figure out how to do. Again, really isn't talked a lot about or documented very well, but if you follow this real quick, it's really pretty simple. It's just pipe delineated with a colon in between. This is setting up the table. You may have a hierarchical, right, or a header up here, and then down below you're snapping all of the columns into each of these different areas here. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, right, which snap to that, and that's kind of how the table format works. In the images are really, really easy. This is interesting. There's 2 ways Markdown does images. You can store an image in with an image name, or if you don't want to put anything inside the square brackets, like you can just leave it like this. But images require the bang. So if you don't have the bang in front of it, then Markdown won't display it as an image. It'll display it as a link. So making sure that you remember to put the bang in front of it, put any name that you want inside the square brackets. If you do want to give it an additional context, you can wrap it in quotes after the link itself. So that's pretty much how images are displayed, and you can kind of see where that image is displayed within the GitHub. So it's all tied back to that repository so that they're all accessible for the workbook. But that's pretty much it, and it's pretty simple to do that. And if you want, you can step into an advanced editor directly in here, for this Markdown. And then the awesome thing is I can click preview after I'm done testing my Markdown, and I can see, right, what my preview looks like. And if I need to make any changes, I can then come back to my Markdown and make any changes.
Wow. Well, this has been extremely informative. We're not definitely rushing anybody off the show. This is Wednesday night. Is night I have to cook, right? So I better go get dinner.
Well, Rod's been still too quiet. So Rod,
I know.
Anything from Rod here about this?
So no, not really. The only thing, so there is a lot of click around, because a lot of SOCs, of course, once they get their procedures in place, they're going to want to automate it even further. The only thing I would mention is, Rand, you can talk about automation rules, how to apply these things a little bit more automatic for the descriptive remediations. Also, Markdown also supports a subset of HTML, so you can actually use an image tag. So
yeah, so I'll actually kind of show you what that looks like real quick. So if you click on, I'm trying to remember which one it is. So analytical, and so let's scroll down to my analytical piece right here, and then go to SOC use cases. So under here, you can see I have like some really cool color code for onboarding key analytics. This is a table for, anybody who wants to onboard detections and keep a running tab of what's been onboarded, what's been put into hold, what's in dev, what's in test, what's in prod, and then color coding them and then snapping them through like to a table. So when you come in and you look at the way that table is broken down, where did it go? There it is. So, okay. Yep, click at it. All right, so when we kind of get down into that, you can kind of see right here, like P-style background color, Dodge blue. So I'm actually color coding the text inside the table. So I'm using, again, simple table format with a background style using like tomato for hold with a description on that. But you can come in here and make any changes that you want, change the color, from orange or light gray or medium green or Dodger blue or whatever you want to use. But everything's transparent. It's all here for you to be able to customize, change, and mock up however you see fit for your business.
Well,
that was one of the real quick, Edward. Sorry, that was one of the coolest things learning was that Markdown supported HTML, and that I could come in and add a lot of different HTML styles in here. So I kind of took advantage of that.
So there is one more question or potential recommendation in the chat. It's Cyberbat Girl is still here. SOC teams may be required to provide monthly or quarterly reports or recommendations about the findings. Is there anything on the roadmap for helping surface the lessons learned from past events to enable continued improvements? And that is a good one, because our SOC operations efficiency doesn't include lessons learned. It just shows mean time for closing investigations.
Right. So the workbook does, it does cover that. Let's see here. It is, I'm trying to remember, under business. So process improvement and process maturity, as well as documentation standards. We do talk about performing assessments, appraisal method. It's leveraging the Carnegie Mellon Software Engineering Institute's capability maturity model, or CMM, right, for SOC operations. So it talks about the planning and preparation on-site phase, right, reporting phase, and what that might look like. I do also give you an example of, where did I've got to, let's see, under the operational side, weekly threat intelligence reports, and kind of giving you an example of like security threat intel, key articles of interest, right, what that might look like from a threat intelligence report. You could add some additional stuff in here as well. And then there was my shift log management of how to document. So this is an example of right, the post-mortem, the lessons learned, or what's been gathered so far within that shift log. So storing all of that here. So kind of giving an example around this particular incident, the entities, the incident link, the notes and actions, things learned, right? All of that stuff can be stored here as well. In this particular example, I'm just leveraging OneNote, right? Because we're pretty heavy on, on internal Microsoft, and the way that we're thinking about that, we leverage OneNote to kind of store, things that, we're trying to drive towards and share information. It makes it easy to do that kind of thing. So this is just kind of an example of what that might look like.
And if you actually have to pull together a war room, a lot of this content and narrative could also be captured in Teams with that functionality that's in there also. Yeah. Yep. You can just cut it out of Teams, and that way you'll have it, right? Because the owner of that team, unless you have some type of archive, is the only person that can delete that content. I believe that's correct.
Yeah, for the SOC war room here, it's calling out like the Teams piece and the crisis response and what that might look like for crisis remediation. So there's even examples on what that might look like.
Yep. Man, it's good stuff. Well, I don't have any other questions. Ren, Franklin, do you have any questions?
I am all good. It's just so much to think about. I mean, this could be a book on its own that you could buy at the store. A course of its own too, about the overall procedural side.
Well, I'll wait for the movie. I'll play Ren in the movie. You could tell people that work hard, Ren, because we don't have any hair. You don't have any hair, Rod.
I know, right?
Franklin has a head full of hair. He's not stressed out about anything, right? So for us real workers, we've worked our hair out of our head.
It's a wig.
Hey, we definitely would love for you to come back on, especially when V2 comes out, right? To show us, hey, V1, V2, and make some announcements. Leave us, in anticipation, because we don't know two things. We don't know when V2 is coming out, and then we don't know when it's going to be automatically pulled by the engineering and product group, so that it populates as a workbook inside someone's subscription, rather than what I had to do. I had to copy it down and put it in there. That's all I have. So guys, thanks so much, Ren. Thank you. I'll